So in the first week of September, I was going through my collection and I repotted a lot of things in the spring, but I neglected a couple of repots in the summer. But I was going through shelf by shelf. I'm avoiding some of my huge cattleyas on the shelf behind me, but I was going through this Phalaenopsis shelf and I repotted a lot of these last spring. A lot of them that I put in these square pots just straight up outgrew them. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through repotting some of them. I put them into sphagnum moss and it's going to be a nice little lazy repot that I did on a Sunday morning a couple of weeks ago. I hope you enjoy. This one is the Jiaho's Pink Girl, Phalaenopsis Schilleriana, and we have Phalaenopsis Vivian. These are all very pretty, so I'm going to repot them all with you. I've got some pots, all of them have drainage holes, some alcohol to disinfect my cutting tools. We're going to disinfect in between every single plant, a little bark, some moss. I like to pot up in moss, and we're going to get started. Let's start with Jiaho's Pink Girl. So I put them in these square pots last year, and I kind of regret it because they are kind of growing through. I'm going to lose some of these roots because there's no way that I can cut this pot out. So let's see what I can do here. I think, yeah, some of these have grown through. I've watered everything to try to loosen things up, but we'll see. It's tough with these sort of pots. I need to keep, yeah, we lost some roots, but there's no way that you could cut through some of these pots. Yeah, and this one ripped through the bottom. It's okay. So we're gonna free this up. These repots are quite easy. They're Phalaenopsis. They don't really take too much to repot them. They're quite vigorous. We're just gonna get rid of the media. And as you can see, I use mostly moss. This works well in my environment. The pot wasn't too big, so these dried out pretty quickly. I don't see a lot of dead roots here, which is good. I topped it off with bark. A tip that I got from Miss Orchid Girl years ago to prevent the algae, the unsightly algae on top. I don't think it does anything bad to the orchid personally, but it just looks ugly for me anyway, so it's not a big deal. Some of my orchids do have no bark on top, and they are okay. But we do have some dead roots here, but this was very easy to clean out. So in order to tell if a root is healthy or not, you're gonna see if it's firm. This one is firm, this is alive, but this one right here is dead. It's papery, it's thin. So those are the ones that we're gonna cut off. But first, what we're gonna do is we're gonna get the media off all of these phals before we move on to cutting the roots. It's kind of sad when you lose roots like that, but it was because of the pot, but it'll be okay. Okay, now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take a little rubbing alcohol and I'm gonna rub it on my gloves just in case there's any bacteria or anything like that on the plant. I just took some. This is a way of like me disinfecting my gloves just in case. So my hands are clean. Okay, so I'm gonna grab my Phalaenopsis Schilleriana, which is right here. Very beautiful orchid. Look at those leaves. Very mindful, very demure. I'm just kidding. That's so annoying. So we're gonna take this and we're gonna free it. I'm gonna try not to touch everything in there. And we have the same situation. We have some roots growing out on the bottom, so there's not much that can be done with this. Oh, this is so frustrating. Yeah, we just lost the root. There's not much that can be done. The root system is fine. It was just growing outside, so that's not ideal. But we have decent roots here. I am cross-contaminating a little bit. Some of this is hitting that old moss. We're just freeing it up. This has been in this setup for a year. The moss is still fresh, but I just need to move it to a better pot. That was not a good idea to put it into those square pots, in my opinion. We're gonna get that off. And wow, yeah, this root system is quite good. You could see what's an aerial root versus what was in the pot. These aerial roots are quite dry. It's okay. And we're gonna put this on the side and then go to our next orchid. Okay, let's check out this last one. Can we get away with keeping it here? I kind of do. This looks so good in this setup. I kind of don't want to touch it. Oh, I think I'm gonna leave this orchid here. It's been a year in this setup and I mean, it looks healthy to me, so I don't want to touch it. So I think I'm gonna leave this alone. And maybe what we'll do is we'll repot it next spring, but honestly, this looks beautiful. Yeah, we're gonna leave this alone. Okay, let's start with this Jiaho's Pink Girl. So we're gonna look for roots that have died off, and these are papery thin. We're gonna cut it just under where the healthy tissue starts to not introduce a wound to this orchid. Here we have a little, this is alive, it's firm, and this is dead, it's squishy. So just under. The root system here looks good, but we did lose some of the older roots, so that's no problem. We're gonna trim them right off. This is a vigorous orchid. It's got fragrance, which is fantastic, and I really like it. The flowers are cute. This blooms twice a year for me. Usually gives me double spikes. And yeah, this is looking great. Like, I didn't really lose roots from last year to this year, not many. Let's see. Yeah, no, we're good. Yeah, this looks great. The stem is getting longer. Eventually I will cut the stem, but we still have roots that are very viable here, so I don't want to do that. When this all dies off, we can cut the stem, but for now it'll just keep getting taller and taller. So maybe in a year or two. Let's see. This doesn't look bad. Anything that's dead is minimal. So just trim it off. Trim, trim. We do have some that I had to rip off when I took it out of the pot. So we don't even have to trim off these little strings like here. Let's see, a little more. There. And then I think we're good. Maybe I'll trim the dead spike back just a little bit. Okay. Done. This leaf will eventually die and fall off. We have a new leaf coming in. These roots look amazing. Yeah, let's get it into a new pot. I kind of want to put it in this pot. It has a drainage hole. I got this from my friend. She has a business that I will link down below for you guys. But this has one drainage hole, so I mean, it's going to be a little slower draining than this because this has multiple drainage holes. So what I'll do is I'll add some more bark in here. I normally do 100% moss, but I want to make sure this has good drainage. So we'll mix it up. We'll do a mixture of bark and moss in here, just because of that one drainage hole, and we want to make sure that water flows freely through the pot. So we're going to put some bark in the bottom with moss, and we're just going to sandwich it in. So I chose this pot because this pot was just, let me show you. I tried in this pot, this is a 4-inch pot. It was just too small. It could fit the roots, but it was going to be a tight fit in there. So this one is slightly larger. It's a very beautiful pot. So we're going to take all of these roots, we're going to put it in here. Now you're not able to see the roots in a pot like this, but that's all right. I know that this is a vigorous orchid and it's a happy orchid, and I don't have any issues with it, and I don't mind not seeing the root system. Let me see if I could center it to a face. Yes, perfect. There we go. There we go. Let's add a little bark. But we're going to do mostly moss just because these do like their moisture. And I think it's going to be happy in here. But as I said, my rationale is that this is a pot with one drainage hole, and it's not like it's going to drain, of course. It's a requirement. You need drainage in your pots, but it's not going to have as much drainage as the other pots that I use. So that's why I'm keeping it airy accordingly. Just a little bit of bark in here. And notice, I'm not gonna pack the moss down in a way that it's like super packed down that keeps everything soggy. I'm keeping it like, I'm putting it in here, but I'm making it fluffy. Like it's definitely going in there. It's definitely getting around all of the roots, but when I'm putting it in here, I'm making sure that it's airing out. Like I'm tucking it in, but wiggling it around. I think this orchid is gonna be happy here. This pot is so cute, my goodness. I love cute pots. But for orchids, you just have to make sure that you're making it work for drainage. So these pots are beautiful, but you just want to make sure that they get enough air to those roots with the drainage and without overdoing the moss to the point that it's too soggy. Like I usually do 100% moss, but my rationale is the drainage on this pot. I like to top off with bark as well, just to keep that algae from looking slimy and green, but you don't have to do that. You could do 100% moss like I normally do. But again, it depends on your environment, really. Like moss does not work well for people in very hot and humid environments because it stays wet and doesn't get a chance to dry. But in New York, I find that it works well for me. It works well for my friends up here. So this is good for our climate. You just have to do trial and error and see what works best for you. That could be husk. It could be leca. For me, I experimented with leca for a while and I just found that a lot of phals prefer it warmer and they don't do well in leca over time. It could be husk. You just have to do whatever is right for you and your environment. So this is it. We are good here. This is so cute. I love this orchid and I love this pot. How cute are you? Okay, let's move on to the Schilleriana. Okay, here's the Schilleriana. We have some visibly dead roots. They're very dried off. There's no substance to them. They're papery, so we're gonna trim them off. And we can fast forward here. Anything like this can stay on. Sometimes you'll see a dead part with a healthy part, so I just leave that alone. So interesting. These roots are so weird. Look at the inner pot root and the outer pot root. So strange. I'm going to try to tuck them in. I don't know if the roots will survive going from aerial to inside, but we shall see. It's such a straggly, long root system. And I know I damaged some of it getting it out of that pot. But we're doing our best with this. I think that's it. Like, I really don't see much else. Like, it's not going to be a big deal to leave everything here. This was from a root that had to be ripped off. Unfortunate. But in terms of pots, we have this 4-inch pot that I have a feeling is going to be too small. This is just a bigger root system. So I have this 5-inch pot. I hate these large pots because they have these slots and the roots go through them. And then every time I have to repot, I have to cut them. But it's all I have. And I think it's the only one that will fit this root system. So yeah, I think this will work. So let's get some moss on the bottom. We're going to start with moss. Remember, we're going to keep it nice and fluffy. And then I'm going to put the aerial roots just in there. If they die, they die. But this should push new roots. It already has a new root tip over here. So we'll see how it goes. Some of them do have growing root tips. Over here, there's a few more. So we'll see what happens. It's just hard because this root system is so rigid. So bear with me as I try to finagle this in here. Okay. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put moss in the center and then just wrap the roots around it. Okay, we've contained it a little bit. Let's get it in here. Okay, we'll see how this does, but we got most of it in here, which is good. Okay, now we can add our moss, but we're gonna be very careful. I'm not worried that this is just 100% moss here because this has a very extensive root system. When there's a very big root system that's healthy, it absorbs water, and it absorbs water very quickly. Now, if this orchid did not have a lot of good roots, I wouldn't advise just moss because then it wouldn't absorb everything well. So if you had like 3-4 roots in here and this pot swimming with moss, it's gonna stay wet too long. This will not stay wet too long. And reason for that is those roots are gonna be soaking up all of the water. And I'm gonna keep this fluffy. I'm not packing it down too hard, too heavy. We're just gonna keep it nice and fluffy. And it should work out quite well for this orchid. Now we do have some air gaps here, so I'm gonna try to get some more moss in here in a way that makes sense. So let me see what I can do. I'm gonna try to get moss in there, but not pack it down so much. So I'm gonna stick it in there and then kind of like loosen it up. So it's not too heavy. Because I want moss to make contact with everything in there, but I also don't want it to be too tight in there. So you notice I kind of plop it in there and then kind of like fluff it out. It's not super dense. I just want to get it into the pockets here so it's covered. Okay. Maybe a tiny bit more. This orchid is very prone to crown rot, so you have to be careful. You have to be careful that you don't overwater. You have to be careful that you don't water in the crown. So I killed one long ago with that. So there we go. I want to make sure this is above. Yeah. There we go. It's not buried in too deep. And this is good. I'm gonna top it off with some bark. Optional, completely optional, not necessary. It just looks better. Less green slime at the very top. But if you don't have bark, no worries. This is all for aesthetic purposes. gotta give credit to Miss Orchid Girl for this one. This was a good tip. Okay, and we are done. I'm gonna put it in this decorative pot I have right here. So this is it, all set. It does tend to flop over, which is normal, and it's getting bigger. But I'm looking forward to seeing how it does over time. These are all done. Look how cute. Those bottom leaves are gonna die on this Jiaho's Pink Girl, and that's okay. Look at how vigorous it is. And then the Schilleriana is all set. These should acclimate very well. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye, everyone.